Hello everyone, I'm back and we're ready for chapter 8 of The Treasure Hunter's Tale. Oh, plonk. Many months had passed since Mrs. Rejoice in the Lord Always' funeral, and the old mother poor in spirit and her daughter, beloved of the king, had traversed many miles under the faithful guidance of the officer of the king. They had to go rather carefully these days, as dear old Miss Poor in Spirit was feeling her age and needed many rests, but her mind and soul were still as lively as ever. "I wonder," said she to her daughter one day, "if we might find a place to live a little while, in one place, for as long as we are still living for the king and following his way, I am sure he would not object." She looked at her daughter. "I have been thinking of it for some time, to tell you the truth," she confided. "Not to stop my journey, but who knows, maybe we could even do some good as we settle somewhere for a while." She looked again at her daughter, who was frowning and biting her lip. "What say you, my dear? Do speak truthfully." "Of a truth I do not know," Miss Beloved of the King said quietly. "I have been wanting to do something for the king too, but do not know what it is." "Why not ask him?" said a kind voice behind them, and there was the king's officer riding a white horse which was pulling a small cart. "My dear ladies, the king himself has sent me with a commission for you both." He paused. The two ladies gripped each other's hands in great delight and trepidation, and said together in excited, trembling voices, "Speak, lord, for your servants heareth." "Well said," smiled the officer. "A little way yonder from here, over these hills, there is a great country in these lands called Unreached. It is full of those who have not yet heard the good news of the king and his son, and the king has commissioned you to go there and set up home and tell the people what they must know, and through neighbourly kindnesses and godly activity to woo them for him. So, will you go?" The officer, with a grand flourish, held out the two commissions stamped with the king's own seal. The ladies breathed quickly. Such a commission was not to be entered into lightly. At last old Miss Poor in Spirit stepped gently forward and held out her wrinkled hand. "Here I am. Send me," she said softly, but with real determination in her voice. Miss Beloved of the King's bosom heaved with delight to see her mother so ready to serve, even in her weakness, and stepped forward too. Putting first her arm through her mother's, she said to her, "I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge, and thy people shall be my people. Where thou diest I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part me and thee." Then she held out her pretty young hands to take her commission, and added, "For thy God is my God." "Well said again," smiled the king's officer. "A true Naomi and Ruth you two are, to be blessed like them too, mark me." And before the ladies could ask further what was meant by this last remark, which seemed to drip with hope and promises of kinsman redeemers and such, the officer changed the subject. "Now, the day is nearly spent, and I would have you settled in your new commission before sundown. Make haste," said he, offering his strong right arm to help her old Miss Poor in Spirit into the cart, and holding the hand of Miss Beloved of the King so she would not stumble at the very start. Off went the cart along the road until they came to a wide open country. "This," said the king's officer, looking over his shoulder, "will be your new home for however long the king pleases. I have already arranged a little house for you to tend, and it has a small garden too, in which grow readily the fruit of the spirit." At this he smiled to himself. "Take as much of it as you need." Miss Beloved of the King took off her cloak and laid it over her mother, who, after all the excitement and the gentle bumping of the cart, had fallen asleep. "Is there no one in this vast country that knows of the king and his road? Are we to be the only ones?" asked Miss Beloved of the King to her friend the officer, as he drove the horse steadily along the road. "My dear," said the king's officer, looking at her gravely, "have you not read of Obadiah, how he was a devout believer in the Lord, and had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in the caves and provided for them? And did not God himself say to Elijah that he had many who had not bowed the knee to Baal?" "Yes," said the young lady thoughtfully. "Then know that the king will always have his remnant. You need not worry about being the only ones. And anyway, the king intends to do a great work through you both with the people you speak to." "But what shall we say? I mean, we are but 2 women. What is that among so many?" "Did not Prince Emmanuel, when he was on his commission, have such a similar question asked to him?" "Yes," said Miss Beloved of the King happily, for only that morning she had read the account in her Bible of the feeding of the 5,000. "And what was his response?" asked the officer encouragingly. "Why, he made 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread feed 5,000 men. Not to mention the women and children with leftovers too," laughed the officer. "So, do you need me to answer your question?" 2 willing women are better than a whole band of unbelieving or lukewarm men. At this he spat, as to spew them out of his mouth. No, he said, the king will give you all you need to do the job he has for you to do. Just enough, mind, not so much that you would get cocky and think you're doing it in your own strength, but not too little either so that you can't accomplish it. By now the cart was well in the suburbs of the county and fast approaching the centre. That rubbish that some men teach that the king won't ever give you more than you can manage is wrong, he said firmly, and has caused many a traveller of the road to wander off and doubt his goodness. No, that is told by wolves in sheep's clothing, preachers pretending to be on the king's road, when in actual fact they are greatly deceived, or just flat out in league with the evil one. He spat again. No, the truth is, my dear, that on this commission you will have days when you are totally overwhelmed, and even tempted to doubt my presence, even though you have proved it many a time. He looked at her steadily and smiled sadly. Just remember, I will be with you even unto the end, he said. The cart pulled up to a small house. It was cosy looking and incredibly inviting. It was called the House of Bread, and it was to be the ladies' home for however long the king pleased it to be so. Well, ladies, said the king's officer, stretching his back as if he had been weighed down with a heavy concern, this is your stop, and very nice it is too. Remember to always talk of the good news of the king and to show his kindness to others. Don't rely on action, though. You have to say the news as well as live it. And with that he blessed them and went his way. The 2 ladies hugged each other, then knelt down and sent earnest messages of thanks to the king for their commission and asked him for his help in doing what he would have them do each day. And now we must to bed, yawned Miss Poor-in-Spirit, for our work begins in earnest tomorrow. Good night, dear child, and may God grant you peace. She kissed her tenderly and lay down on the bed next to Miss Beloved of the King's, for they shared a small bedroom. Indeed, the little house was very compact, but had everything they needed to be content to serve in the place where they had been set.